In 2001, the world bought 10 million MP3 players. By 2015, that number had collapsed to less than 1 million, a fall so sudden it is almost invisible today. What happened to the device that once redefined how we listen to music and ruled every pocket? The answer reveals how a revolution disappeared almost overnight. Within a single generation, everything changed. A backpack weighed down with jewel cases, tangled headphone cords snaking out of pockets. For anyone growing up with cassette players or Discmans, music on the go meant compromise. The cassette Walkman, with its chunky buttons and plastic shell, made every step a gamble. Would the tape get chewed up, or would the batteries die halfway through your favorite song? Even the sleekest Discman demanded careful handling. One bump on the bus and the music skipped, the spinning CD stuttering to a halt. Jogging with a Discman was a test of patience and wrist strength, not just stamina. Choices had to be made before leaving home. Which albums deserved a spot in your bag? Most people picked 2 or 3, stuffing them into zippered cases that bulged in jacket pockets. For a long trip, the routine was familiar. You would sort through a pile of plastic, double-check batteries, and pray you had not left your favorite tape in another player. Every play, rewind, or fast forward wore down the mechanism just a little more. The hiss of tape and the whir of spinning discs became part of the soundtrack. Sharing music was a ritual. Friends swapped mixtapes, scribbling track lists in pen, but copying a CD meant real time. You had to sit and wait as the burner spun, the process as slow as the music was fast. There was no shuffle button, no instant access to every song you owned. Each album was a physical object, and every song played came with a price, space, weight, and the risk of damage. For all the joy music brought, the hassle of keeping it close was a daily struggle. A blank cassette, a stack of CDs, and a quiet bedroom on a Saturday night, this was the laboratory of the mixtape maker. Every track chosen with care, every pause button pressed with precision. For teenagers in the 1990s, a mixtape was not just a playlist, it was a message, a memory, a secret code passed between friends or slipped into a crush's locker. Making one took patience. You would sit by the stereo with your finger hovering over the record button, waiting for the perfect moment to catch a song off the radio, hoping the DJ would not talk over the intro. Each song meant rewinding, fast forwarding, and sometimes starting over when the timing did not line up. A single tape could take hours to finish. The finished product was more than music. It was a story told in someone else's words, arranged by your own hand. Track lists were scrawled onto folded notebook paper, decorated with doodles and inside jokes. The right mixtape could make a long bus ride feel like an adventure, or turn a rainy afternoon into something cinematic. Giving one as a gift was a small act of bravery. You were offering a piece of yourself, hoping the recipient would understand what each song meant. Every mixtape was unique, impossible to duplicate exactly. The hiss of the tape, the click of the stop button, even the accidental snippets of conversation caught between tracks, all became part of the experience. Before digital files and streaming, music sharing was personal, deliberate, and a little bit magical. The ritual of making and receiving a mixtape made music feel like a treasure, not just a background soundtrack. In a small lab in Erlangen, Germany, a team led by Karl-Heinz Brandenburg set out to answer a question that had stumped audio engineers for decades. How could music sound full and rich, yet fit into a fraction of the space? Their perceptual coding was a method that stripped away sounds the human ear couldn't detect, shrinking audio files by more than 90% without losing the soul of the song. In July 1995, the .mp3 file extension became official, and suddenly, the idea of carrying a personal music library didn't sound like science fiction anymore. By 1998, the first dedicated MP3 players appeared on store shelves. The Seihan MP-Man F10, born in South Korea, could hold about 8 songs on its 32 megabytes of flash memory. It was joined later that year by the Diamond Rio PMP300, which landed in American electronics stores and drew headlines for its pocket-sized promise and its run-in with the recording industry. These early devices were primitive by today's standards, no color screens, no playlists, just a handful of files transferred over a clunky parallel port. But for the first time, music lovers could slip dozens of tracks into a shirt pocket, free from spinning discs or fragile cassettes. The idea of a jukebox in your pocket had gone from fantasy to proof of concept, setting the stage for an explosion in demand. In the summer of 1999, a college freshman named Sean Fanning released a program from his dorm room that would ignite a revolution. Napster was not sleek or polished, but it let anyone with a dial-up connection find and download thousands of MP3 files in minutes. Suddenly, every song you had ever wanted could be yours, no matter how rare or out of print. The idea of music as a scarce, physical object vanished overnight. Within months, millions of users flooded the service, swapping tracks at a rate the music industry had never seen. The rules of music ownership were rewritten by teenagers in bedrooms and computer labs, all moving faster than anyone could control. The Recording Industry Association of America, caught off guard, responded with lawsuits. Their first target had been hardware, taking Diamond Multimedia to court in 1999 over the Rio MP3 player. But the real panic began when they saw the scale of file sharing on Napster. By July 2000, a federal judge ordered Napster to block access to copyrighted music, but the genie was already out. The headlines blared, the lawsuits multiplied, and the appetite for digital music only grew. The old guard was on the defensive, scrambling to contain a wildfire started by a single college student and a few million hungry listeners. The world wanted instant, limitless music, and there was no turning back. On a stage in Cupertino in October 2001, Steve Jobs held up a white rectangle no bigger than a deck of cards. The iPod promised 1,000 songs in your pocket, an idea that sounded almost impossible just a year before. Apple had found a way to fit a 5GB hard drive inside a smooth minimalist shell and paired it with a navigation wheel that made scrolling through music feel effortless. The iPod was not the first MP3 player, but it was the first to feel like a finished product, not a science project. Then came the iTunes Store in 2003. For 99 cents per track, anyone could buy a song legally, download it instantly, and sync it to their iPod with a single click. No more late-night hunts through sketchy file-sharing sites. No more worrying if your music would play or if your computer would get a virus. Suddenly, digital music had a storefront as polished as any record shop, and it was open 24 hours a day. Falling storage prices made it possible to carry entire discographies, not just a handful of favorites. The iPod and iTunes worked together so seamlessly that millions stopped thinking about the technology and just enjoyed the music. For a while, it felt like the future had arrived, and that future was white earbuds and a click wheel. What about you? Do you remember your first MP3 player, or the first song you bought on iTunes? Drop your story in the comments below. If you enjoy discovering how technology keeps reshaping our world, consider subscribing so you do not miss the next evolution story. In January 2007, Steve Jobs stepped onto the stage and pulled an object from his pocket that would change everything about how people carried music. The first iPhone blended a phone, a web browser, and a full-featured iPod into a single glass and metal slab. With 4 GB of flash memory, a multi-touch screen, and a built-in iPod app, it put thousands of songs, phone calls, and the entire internet in one place. Jobs scrolled through album covers with a swipe of his finger, showing a world where music, photos, and messages all lived together. Suddenly, the idea of carrying a separate MP3 player felt outdated. The phone had swallowed the jukebox whole. By 2008, the rules of music changed again. Spotify's beta quietly launched in Sweden, offering millions of songs on demand, streamed straight from the cloud, as mobile networks crossed the threshold for reliable audio. First with 3G and then with 4G, carrying a local library started to seem unnecessary. A whole generation stopped worrying about syncing, storage space, or lost files. For boutique MP3 player makers, the shift was unforgiving. One founder who had spent years perfecting aluminum cases and custom firmware watched as orders dried up almost overnight. The company's final batch shipped out in silence, replaced by a world where music lived everywhere and nowhere, just a tap away. Today, streaming puts every song in your pocket, but every breakthrough carries an expiration date. As devices and habits evolve faster than ever, the next revolution may be closer than we think. No technology stays on top forever. Subscribe, watch the next story, and stay curious about what is coming.